my book, The Endless Summer,
That's very good. You
is
have a real copy.
it's filled with a lot of it's filled with a lot of gray. And actually, the cover is sepia. It's sort of grayscale. For a summertime book, there's no color except for the blood red title. But I think, probably most of my writing is pretty gray because I think life is gray. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. Children get sick and die. Grandmas get sick and die. And so writing should be an escape, but unless you're writing just pure fantasy, happy tales typically are not realistic tales,
Right.
So that sort of populated a lot of my writing, and I gravitate towards that. I will say this, though, about writing. It's interesting because once COVID hit and the pandemic really hit and the lockdown happened and everybody was like getting really depressed and, mental health was increasing and suicides were increasing, I stopped writing a lot of dark stuff and I actually started writing happier stuff. So for me as an author, I guess the pandemic was probably an upper. Matter of fact, this painting behind me, this was created on cardboard by my children during pandemic when their school closed down and we had them home. We were like, oh boy, we got to do something with these kids. And so we started doing an awful lot more art. Yeah. And so now we have like boxes and boxes of COVID books. You come home from the hospital after your child has been born. They should, they give you like a bag of diapers and like a blanket to wrap the kid up in and everything. I think that they should also include a paper shredder with the birth of every child. Oh, yeah. Because you got to do something because you can't keep all of their art.
Right,
and, some of it is just scribbles and you think, oh boy, that should just go in the box,
I have a drawer about this deep and wider than I can hold, the camera can just full, and it's hard to get rid of them though.
It is, and we have four boys, and so they produce voluminous amounts. And so,
our children are precious, and what they create is precious. I only have one, and they're 19 now, and they don't even remember doing, the art and stuff. So there's a moment in like childhood where it's like they're no longer that person. I mean, that person is definitely there. Yeah. But they in their brain, they're no longer that person. So I think there's a wonderfully bittersweet lesson in when a child grows up and they're like, just throw it away. Why are you keeping it, Mom? It's stupid. It's it wasn't like I was a great artist.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, but you were to me.
I realized as they grow, they sort of lose those memories, and I was like, wow, And so now I can talk to my kids about their childhood, and it's really exciting because they're like, I don't remember doing that as a baby or something like that. And so we talk about it, and I show them, pictures and stuff like that, and I say, oh, this is when you did this or that or the other, And so it's really neat to see growth. And of course, our kids are 3, 5, 8, and 10, so they're really spaced out pretty evenly, and so you see them at all of these different stages of development. It's neat to watch human beings grow and change and transmogrify into something, who knows what. So children have fueled my writing. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the stories I write are about kids. This whole book is about a group of 10-year-old boys. I have another book on Amazon Kindle called The Wall, and it's about a 10-year-old girl. I don't know what it is about 10-year-olds, but
I don't know. I think there are certain ages that are major turning points in people's lives, and 10 seems to be like a pretty,
10 is like you're leaving childhood, but you're not quite in adolescence, and there's that weird liminal phase there. And I think
you're still at that age where you're not trying to be too serious.
Right.
You just want to play. You just want to experience. And you're kind of past that initial learning stage. I mean, you can speak, you can walk, hopefully.
Just like,
taking, I don't know, it's just a really wonderful age. I remember,
Yeah,
just going to the playground every single day and just not
yeah.
able to get enough of swimming and running and it's
Exactly. Yeah. You
climbing
can really
trees.
enjoy being off, like
Yeah.
for summer break from school and everything like that. Whereas, when you're an adult, you're like, all I want to do is like sit on the couch and like binge watch Netflix. When they're out of school, they're like, let's go, let's do something,
Yeah.
let's have an adventure. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully that's still happening.
I think it's changing because unfortunately, media and electronics, I think, have really snatched a lot of that away from our children these days, and that's sad.
Yeah.
But I think it takes a conscious effort because I think since adults tend to be, I hate to say lazy, maybe tired.
Tired. I
Word.
was gonna say, I think
Yeah.
it's tired and it
Tired. When adults. Yeah, they're just tired. So when they have time off, they're like, I just want to sit down. And I think our kids pick up on that. So as a parent, you have to make a conscious effort to say, no, I'm not going to be that parent that's just, sitting there, on my phone like this, the
Yeah.
whole
Oh
thing.
gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and we need to produce more children like that. So,
Yeah.
um,
Oh,
but
so there we went back to well, but we're talking about children for your book, the end.
yeah, that's right.
And so
That was
just
not my intention at all. None
oh,
of that is
that's okay.
scripted. I didn't plan on saying any of that.
No, totally.
But I will say, in some ways, I'll transition this. How about this? Growing up from childhood into adulthood, a lot of writers are that same way. And, when I look back to the stuff that I wrote at first and the stuff that I write now, it's way different. And I always lead off with, in my cover letter, if they want a cover letter, I always say something like, I have read several issues of your magazine and I love it. I greatly appreciate what you publish. And so I've written a story that I think would be a good fit for your magazine. And that's how I start off the cover letter. It's gotten me a lot more acceptances, not the cover letter, but just reading the publications. And I would say probably I have a 30 to 40% acceptance rate for submissions.
That's high.
Yeah, it's pretty high, but that's because I don't shotgun submit. I read carefully, and then I carefully select a work that would fit the publication. After I started getting a lot of stories published, I realized, especially with the non-paying market, I'm like, wow, I'm like spending a lot of time on writing and spending a lot of time submitting, and I'm not getting any payment for it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not that I begrudge anybody anything, but at the same time, it's like there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into writing. And I thought, am I just writing and submitting so that I get a lot of stuff published for free? That's not, I don't know what kind of a goal that is, to be perfectly honest. So, I would submit now to a charitable anthology or something like that. So if all the proceeds go to charity, I don't mind submitting to an anthology like that. But I've switched over and I've said, I'm not going to gouge people or anything like that, but I really want to get paid for what I do because I want to produce stuff that's good enough that people actually would buy. That's really, rather than getting 100 stories published, I think the truer measure of success is, are people willing to shell out money for this? Writing should be done well and people should value it.
Yeah.
And I think that writing should also be sort of therapy for the author's soul. And if it really is, then I think your readers will find that value in it as well. I got a wonderful review from my book by one of my friends, Sue.
That was a very good review.
Wasn't it an amazing review?
It was a wonderful, beautiful review.
It was beautiful. Her review was, more beautifully written than my book. I was like, wow,
It was very eloquent, for sure. Yeah.
She got out of it exactly what I want people to get out of it. She said, I remembered my own childhood.
Yes.
I went back to riding my own bike. I went back to swimming in my own quarry lake, and stuff like that. I'm like, that's exactly what that book is supposed to do. And so that's what being a writer should be.
Absolutely.
And if you don't feel that, don't do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, my goal is to take people out of the difficulty of life. It's an escape, and it's like, do I want to escape into, well, and this is personal, I don't want to escape into a dreadful COVID world, and so I want, so I'm on the more fantastical side, and my work is dark too, though. I mean, it's like gothic fantasy, satire,
Yeah.
um, but definitely like just giving people a break.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure,
And even dark literature, suspense and stuff like that, even some horror, I mean, it can still make people feel good because
yeah,
at the end of it, they say, wow, that was a great story, and I really enjoyed reading it. So even if your subject matter is heavier, you can still give people a pleasant experience.
yes, yeah.
And so I think that's what writing should be, right? Writing should make people feel,
Yeah.
and I think that writing should leave people better after they've read it than
Yeah.
they were before. Yeah, and I will say this, that's actually as a writer, listening to critical feedback, and I mean that like literally critical, like constructively critical feedback, is really important because most people, when they start writing, they usually think, wow, I'm a great writer. I just wrote this story. This is wonderful. And in reality, it's not really that good. The first story that I ever wrote wasn't that good, and so
Oh,
it took
yeah.
a while to hone my craft. And I did wind up publishing that first story, but only after a major critical revision,
Yeah.
after I had received a lot of editorial feedback from some of my friends who were published authors at the time, and they said, well, it's a good story, but you need to develop this, you need to work on this. And instead of just saying, well, your opinion's crap, and just
Right.
I listen
Oh,
to it.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so if someone who is an accomplished author gives you advice on how to improve your craft, try to follow it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listen to what the beta readers are saying. Listen to what the editors are saying. If they give you constructive, critical feedback, take it seriously.
Oh, absolutely. And if someone goes out of their way, like an editor, I had an agent go out of their way to tell me why they weren't accepting my story. Because I don't have an agent now. I went with a publisher that doesn't. You don't have to have agents. But for a long time, I tried getting an agent, and just I mean, most writers get lots of rejections. I mean, it's not uncommon. You only need one acceptance.
That's it.
You might have 100 rejections. You only need the one acceptance, right? And it was an agent that went out of their way to give that advice. And so yeah, it's like if someone's going to take the time to really give you good advice, it's definitely, you don't have to follow it to the T because you
Right.
don't want to lose your voice and stuff. But your own style, you don't have to change your style or your voice, but definitely follow
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I think so. And, of course, I will say this too. The flip side of that coin is if you're giving advice to another author,
Yeah.
don't try to make their work like your work. Because
Yeah.
I think that's a pitfall too, is saying, well, I like my writing better than their writing, so
Yeah.
I'm going to tell them how to
This
make their
is
writing
how
more
I
like
would write it. I've gotten some of those critiques. You know
Yeah.
what I think you should do with this story? And like
Yeah.
totally changed it. And I'm like, go write your own story, dude. So I think it's important for writers, if they're critiquing, to approach it as a reader. We really have to be able to separate. We kind of need to have two brains when we're critiquing other work. It's like, I'm not doing this as a writer right now. Yes, I have the experience to
Yeah.
be this person, but really looking at it from a reader's perspective
Yeah.
and not attacking people's style or voice.
I read very, very slowly. I'm actually an auditory reader, so I only read about 150 words a minute.
Okay.
I basically, even when I'm reading in my head, I read at the same speed as if I were reading aloud.
Yeah.
And so the good thing about that is I remember virtually everything that I read.
Yeah.
I retain it. The bad thing about that is it takes me a long time to read. And yeah.
I'm kind of I think of it like digesting, like because especially if a writer has a good voice, it's like you don't always catch that voice throughout the story if you don't slow down a little bit. So
Yeah.
I'm not a fast reader. I can read fast, but I don't. Just because I want to hear that voice.
Yeah.
I want to catch the little nuances. I think a lot of times if you read too fast, you lose the nuances. And I've noticed that with some critiquers. It's like, you must have read this story like that because
Right.
the questions say, well, what happened to this? And what was that all about? And it's like, well, did you read the story? Because that was all there, you know? So
It's in there.
you always know that person that's just kind of skimming it.
So for me, I like I like to know the beginning of the story, and I like to really grab people with the first paragraph or the first page, and then I like to have a hook at the end, which is like a twist that they don't expect, which makes them think about the story when they're done reading it. I really
Right.
want people to think about it and say, "Wow, I was totally wrong about what that story was about," you know. But I don't plan any of the middle. So the way I get from the beginning to the end is anybody's guess. It's
Yeah.
just the music hits me, and I just dance along the
Oh,
keyboard
nice.
with a lot of descriptions in there. So I'm a pantser, with the exception that I know how all my stories begin and how they end. But what about you? How do you write? Do you plot or do you pants it?
Usually when I get a story in my head, even if it's a short story, even with my novels, it's like the story just comes, the whole thing, just boom. And so then, of course, you have to fill in. But like for all my stories, I know how they end, and I know how they. Well, I don't always know how they begin, though. So it's like and I'll do like little outlines, like for my. Well, and I've only written. I'm on my second novel right now, so novel wise, it's very different than short story. Short story. I kind of plan my novels just with a brief outline, very, very simple outline. For my short stories, yeah, usually I just have like a core idea and then I just start writing it.
Mhm.
It's not, I don't really plan. I don't think I've ever planned a story. Now that it's like, I've never really thought about it, but
Yeah.
I just start writing it and yeah, go for
Yeah.
it. And
You
yeah.
know,
I mean, I've spent an hour on one paragraph before, you know. And that was at the beginning. Not so much now.
mhm.
With my first novel. I mean, it took me 4 years to write my first novel because I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I had a story to tell, you know. And but yeah. So I guess planning is kind of different for everyone too. I mean, like rolling it over in your mind. Like, I
Yeah.
guess that could be considered planning, huh?
That could be considered planning. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah. Well, planning, not plotting, because I don't
There you
plot. I plan. How about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah.
I'm a
Because like
planning
the
pantser.
plot is just like a core idea.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I kind of feel like if you have a core idea for a story, there's your plot right there, and then you
Right.
just have to make the plot make sense and
Right.
carry it through beginning to end.
Yeah.
Spread it out. So,
I think if I actually wrote like a real novel, I would probably have to plot at some level. Like I would at least have to know, like, some things are going to happen somewhere along the line.
yes,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
I got to get to these mile markers. You
Right,
know,
yeah.
in
And
the writing. of something.
that's what I do, I guess. So I call it an outline, but it's not really an outline. It's just like plot points. And then
Yeah.
I just make sure that one gets to the other and sometimes, I mean, like my first novel, I ended up like swapping stuff around.
Mm.
Yeah, so
Yeah. It's amazing when you write something and you finish it. You know, you hit your last period.
yeah,
You're like, yes, I'm done. You hit Control S for the last time. You're like, yes. And then you let it sit for a little while, and then you go back to do the edit, and you're like, what was I thinking?
yeah.
And a lot of times when something is published, sometimes it's months after you submit it before it
Sure,
even
yeah.
hits print. And I'll be like, yes, the anthology finally came. You'll crack it open and you'll read your story. And I'm like, why did they accept this? This isn't even very good.
My very first story that got published, they actually missed a spelling error. And it was like I think it was something simple like she, and I ended up hitting the D instead of the S, so it was DHE or something like that. It was like a
Uh,
three-letter word.
yeah.
Bugs the crap out of me.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was like, how did they miss that? How did I miss that?
I'll tell you what, I mean, one thing that I've learned is you can't have too many editors,
Right.
copy editors,
Yeah.
because there comes a point when everyone like is so tired that they miss very simple typos. And like you, I hate seeing typos in published work.
Yeah.
So I edit it and upload it in another manuscript, and now I think it's typo free. But the problem is I'm broke, so I can't pay an
Oh,
editor.
yeah.
So I'm self-editing.
Yeah.
So anybody listening out there, if you see any typos in the manuscript, please email me, and I will humbly accept your criticism and fix it.
And now there's really no excuse for major typos. Although I'm doing my copy edit for the novel that's coming out in October, The Eversteam Chronicles Small Demons.
Ooh, very nice.
Yeah, and I'm doing. My publisher said, "Why don't you take one more look at it?" And because it's been like 6 months since I looked at it, he's like, "That now's a great time to take a look, change anything that you want to change, get it back to me, and the editors will take over from there." And I'm really surprised with what I'm finding. Passive writing,
Oh,
no misspellings, but because I run it through a couple of editing programs to really make sure. Plus, I read it and I read it out loud, and I mean,
yeah.
I must have gone over it 20 times, but it's pretty surprising, like what I'm finding. Yeah.
I think if we're honest as authors, we're probably always a little bit surprised by our work. Either how good it is, how bad it is, how many typos there are.
Yeah.
And not just typos, but even after you've been writing for several years, sometimes you still find yourself falling into those old pitfalls.
Sure. Oh gosh, yeah.
Like you said, passive writing or switching tenses or something.
All right. Well, we've been chatting for almost an hour and a half.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's great.
After you edit out all the typos, it'll be much shorter.
Yeah, there you go. So, Adam Stump, pen name A Stump, with The Endless Summer, and your anthology, which that anthology is probably not going to come out for a while, right? The anthology.
I'm looking at publishing it realistically September.
Okay.
I'd like to get it out by August.
Well, thank you very much, Adam, for joining me. Really appreciate you being on here, and have a wonderful day.
You have a wonderful,
summer.
Yes, I hope your summer is endless, but I hope it's not like the endless summer in this book, because that was really fun. Thank you, Jude, for this wonderful opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah.